And we are live again on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicinda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope and desire is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. And we do that in a lot of different ways. My favorite way is actually just sitting down with other creators to talk to them about their projects, their process, and what got them into RPGs, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We're talking with Marco Serrano about the planet world building projects that you have up right now over on Kickstarter, but also just to kind of dive into that project, what got it started, and what got you into things. So, Marco, why don't you go ahead and tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you online.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Marco Serrano, as you said, and I am one part of Spicy Tuna RPG, which I do with my brother in some regards. The details are a little bit weird, but yeah. So we've been doing Spicy Tuna, I guess, ever since 2021. We did Zenith Quest 3, where we released a little system agnostic module called Constant Downpour, and have slowly been putting more and more time into actually developing modules. And you can find us at Spicy Tuna RPG across the board, Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook. But
awesome. And we'll dive into it a little bit more in the future, but just right here at the top, go ahead and tell people about the sci-fi world building notebook and zine project y'all have live right now. Give us just kind of the elevator pitch for that.
Yeah, for sure. So honestly, the notebook, it started as a notebook, and I needed a tool to really build out and be structured for adventures, because I feel very confident in the adventures that I've made, but the process was pretty muddy and very much wading through a swamp just to get to something that was extremely cohesive. The Planet Builder module, which is just a system agnostic random table generator for basically everything you would need in a planet, including factions, cities, significant areas, satellites, and neighbors, etc. That kind of was born out of me needing more. And as I was sending out the notebook to about a dozen creators to test out, who were very kind enough to test out prototypes, I kind of included some of the tables in the back, and then I've really been grueling over that that zine because I want it to be very, I want this, there's sparks. So there's like a single word or 2 words or multiple words. But, I really wanted it to taste different. And really, when I roll something, I wanted to be very inspiring and something a little bit different than what I've seen or what I've used in the past. Like I use things from Knock all the time, or Augmented Reality is another zine that has existed for a while that I use. But I wanted something that was actually a new tool. And so basically they're tools to help people write, and mostly geared towards adventure. So it has like threats and encounters and storylines involved in it, to help you build out what the story is around that world that you're creating.
Awesome. Super excited about it. We're going to dive into that a little bit more towards the end, but let's just talk a little bit about you, and a little bit about the work that you do. But before we get to that, let's talk about just how you got started playing RPGs. What was kind of your entry point into the hobby?
Yeah, I mean, my entry point was 5th edition. I started pretty late. I was, 22 or so. I was in college. And at that point, I had also started, my main friend group was from this lounge that my brother and I ran. And yeah, so doing that, I met some players that really got me into it. I used to, use all my downtime just reading the modules, but I didn't really get to play a lot because I was running the business and going to university. And so I've kind of lived very vicariously through a lot of players and dungeon masters and game masters in general for the last decade. And a couple years ago, a year and a half ago or so, I started running like a one-shot night out of the lounge. And so that's where I started really dipping my toes into running the games and being more involved within it, versus, kind of going from like a studier to an actual participant. So
awesome. That's cool. You talked about some of those early steps and kind of that transition. What kind of spurned that on?
Moving in. So yeah, I guess it kind of starts a decade ago again. So my brother and I have started community-oriented businesses for the last decade. And one of those was, our first one was a hookah lounge. If you're familiar, it's a Middle Eastern tradition. And that was in Omaha, Nebraska. And we opened
classic place to bring Middle Eastern traditions. Omaha, Nebraska. They're always like, how can we get our hands on these?
Right, always in Nebraska. So then we opened a sister pub. It was a hookah pub in Lincoln, and Lincoln is kind of a classic college town. It's where Nebraska is, Nebraska University, and part of that comes with like a lot of competition. And so we ended up failing and going kind of pretty hard into debt. And so we started doing a couple other businesses that weren't necessarily what we loved, but things that we were pretty good at. And then we also got outside work in between and kind of jumbled around that stuff to climb out of debt. And we were doing a lot of stuff that we didn't love for too much, but we both have families. And so, we were doing what we needed to do. And we finally got to a point where we always kind of switched off, where like I would either be doing a lot of stuff I don't love, and Stefan would be doing something experimental that we would love to do, or flip-flop. And so this was finally like getting back into creativity, because I went to school for studio art and painting, or drawing, and I've always been taking creative writing classes and things like that, where I've really wanted to be in this space and wanted to be playing for so long that even when I started playing and GMing, probably only took like 6 months, where it's like I just want to, I figured out about Zine Quest. I want to like make something, and I really was able to dedicate the time that it takes to really be a creative in the space. And yeah, that's kind of how the pivot happened. Is we finally got ourselves into a fortunate enough position where I could kind of spend 10 hours a week really honing in on like the skill in really actually playing more and really allowing ourselves to like take a breath and actually live within things that we love, which is gaming. And then from there, it was kind of a no-brainer for us, where it's like, this is like something I would, we love to do and make, and whether it's something that's going to be our income or not, it might be, but regardless, we'll be making on top of whatever else we're doing, moving forward. So
that's awesome. I love that, and I love like it feels like it's probably nice most of the time to have a built-in partner who you've worked with for a long time, even if it's somebody who, it wasn't necessarily that y'all started working on RPGs together, but the fact that y'all have continued to work together as siblings for a decade now, from project to project to project, makes it seem like it's probably a pretty good working relationship. Also, the ability to just kind of pass things back and forth as far as like who's killing it right now with the stuff that we both hate, who's able to have a little freedom to pursue something. That kind of release, it seems like it must be really, really nice to kind of see. You mentioned you went to school for studio art. Did you do? So have you done the art on y'all's projects so far? Or have you worked with other artists?
I mostly worked with other artists. So I went to school for studio art. We opened the lounge in my junior year, and then promptly after not graduating, after my senior year, I stopped drawing for 6 years. So just kind of classic, always too busy, you know what I mean? Like where you like kind of prioritize your passions, and eventually your soul really feels that. So I did do all of the artwork for Familiar Faces.
Cool.
And so that's my like tip back into it. But we also, my brother's best friend growing up was the kid who wanted to be a concept artist and actually became one. And so he has been really wonderful in doing, he did all of Concept Downpour, and then he did half of Knights of Lazarus. He did the characters on Knights of Lazarus. And then we hired Yedze through Instagram for the artifacts and interior. So
for people who aren't familiar with those projects, I'm gonna pop Familiar Faces up on the screen next to us from your itch page. Tell us a little bit about Familiar Faces.
Yeah, so Familiar Faces is actually what it kind of led to the idea of actually making a notebook as a tool. Like I said, I really needed organization, but if I didn't do Familiar Faces, I don't know if I would have had the foresight to actually do a notebook. So because we did a companion notebook for that, but Familiar Faces is 6 NPCs with necessary professions for the future. And so one thing that I really love about Mothership is it's extremely concise and very careful with what it's using. And that allows me as a warden to really extrapolate on that. But Familiar Faces has like 4 pages dedicated to each NPC. 2 of those pages is a spread of art, but I feel like my main goal with that was to provide more information on their motivations, people they know, connections, really create a sandbox world and allow them to be interesting people, interesting professions and gifts and services that can be utilized throughout shore leave, or it connect them to their next missions, and really used not only the NPCs, but where they live, which is a planetary system, Julep 4, and its 2 satellites, use where they live as a connection point for different modules, no matter what you're running, if it's something that I'm connected with or not. So
cool. That's awesome. And what about Knights of Lazarus?
So Knights of Lazarus also came from, I mentioned I started with 5e, but I had this real hard pivot into much more deadly tabletop systems. And I love the idea of having to solve issues and problems over an elongated period of time. And so Knights of Lazarus kind of takes a lot of the OSR or NSR tropes of, deadly areas to explore and make intellectual decisions to make it through. And also the idea that like although you're trying to infiltrate something, you can always retreat and leave. And so it was actually designed as a dungeon that would be impossible to figure out the first time. And mostly because the enemies themselves each have like some type of quirk that's either going to make you use too much ammo that you're not used to, or use your explosives or need explosives to go through, but you don't know that the first time going through. So you're constantly having to weigh, or push your luck in determining whether you're actually going to make it through or if you're going to leave and go and find it again.
That's awesome.
So
what was the playtest process like for that, or just as you were getting people to play through that for the first time? Because I know a lot of people assume, like, even in lethal systems, right? They assume like, okay, we're either going to get to the end or we're going to die, right? Like the concept of getting even OSR players to know, like, retreat, but like retreat. Don't just like go around the corner and hope they don't follow you. What was it like to kind of break your players into that? Like getting people to think about that in a different way. Was it something you just like told them, hey, this is what it's designed for? Or was that kind of a discovery process as y'all went along?
Yeah, pretty much that. And it became more and more clear that you had to be abundantly obvious. And so the way that I structured the modules itself is the Knights of Lazarus is a giant organization. And so there's, secrets to learn about them and rumors to hear that you get introduced to them. And then when you find out about the dungeon, which is called the ship Canterbury, it's a space station that goes in, in the Outer Rim and such. It's like difficult to find. So in order to figure out about where you're trying to steal from, because it's basically a heist module, then you have to know a bit about them. And then as the communication failed or wasn't as strong as you needed to be, we introduced a couple of NPCs that were treasure hunters themselves. And one of them you find kind of with a javelin through their stomach against the wall, basically hanging, so they're almost dead. And the other one you find basically in a coffin, and also they would have died if you wouldn't have gotten there. And so you get a lot of information as you go through, and then there's information in front of the book to make sure that your players just kind of understand throughout, just really making sure that they know that it's extremely difficult. It's known that people don't make it out, which is kind of the same for any dungeon. And you're always playing heroes, right? But that's kind of how it evolved. Is just make sure that communication throughout was very clear.
Yeah, it's cool. I love how well it captured like the true like space fantasy vibes of like, this is definitely outer space. You are definitely in a ship. You are definitely about that, but also like spacesuits are kind of like armor, and we are really going to pursue these night tropes. The Order of Steel has some just real cool vibes to it. There's a lot of really good like world building that just went into the whole zine and the whole project. So I'm super excited for it. It's a very, very cool project. And so speaking of world building, that's again 100% what the current project is about, though, right? So that brings us kind of up through all the different stuff you all have designed, where you've been at, how that process has grown. And you said, the familiar faces really got you in the mindset of notebooks. And there's a lot of conversations right now. Like you'll see, for 5th edition, a lot of planning notebooks come out. We don't see a ton of like very system agnostic planning tools. So kind of where did the genesis for the idea around the planet building workbook come from initially?
Well, it's kind of funny because originally it was going to be outposts and asteroids, because most adventures currently happen on a ship, on an asteroid, or in an outpost. It's generally not in but honestly, I just loved Planet too much, and I was going to do one of each, but they're the same thing essentially. One's on a planet, one's not on a planet. So yeah, I mean, honestly, like I said, I needed. I'm constantly trying to be better. I like have a lot of imposter syndrome because my play tenure isn't as long, and my like warding or GMing tenure is not as long, and so. you know, I was like, hey, I need to make sure that like whatever I'm making is good enough. You know, I care about the product a lot, obviously, and so you know, I was kind of looking at different things, and you know, I like you said, I mean, I saw the I'm forgetting what it's called, but the small little notebooks for D&D field notes, and then also I might have his name wrong, but I think Jacob Hurst had the world building notebook, which is a pretty popular one, and they're like really large. But the space that I've been really part of is mostly like the Mothership Discord, and then also like SEMO, and then a little bit on Twitter. And like people are making modules and smaller areas to explore, whether that's a pamphlet or a zine. And I was like, well, there's not really something for me that, you know, fits this singular thing, and especially not in space, and especially not prompt driven. And so I know people lean on two ways in notebooks. They want it like completely empty, or they want it prompt driven. And ours try to be like really in between. It's prompt driven, but it's all, if you see the design, it's all to the side. It's all in gray. You can easily ignore it. But like I said, you know, I really wanted something that was a good tool for myself. And then, you know, since I had 12 users to test it, they gave a lot of feedback about what was helpful or not, and what really helped you kind of develop story. And so that was more or less the genesis.
You said it's all to one side, and I had the wrong book up for you to be saying that to the right side. We'll get that one.
Oh, you got the Planet Builder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is when you were talking about that, like, you know, here's a little bit of that look, and you know, one of the cool things I really love about it is the kind of the variation. Like, there's short places to drop notes down, name, atmosphere, gravity, temp, themes, tones, like what people know, what people don't know. Unique or worthwhile things they might find here, civilization, natural order, and kind of where it is at currently. You can kind of drop in, but you also, you know, there's as much or as little space as you want to kind of fill things out, interspaced with, you know, either dot grid or hex stuff. There's kind of different formats for different areas, so that if you want to zoom in or zoom out, make notes on a certain section, other things like that. You've got plenty of space to kind of try different things within the book, and have essentially like your own module or your own home games like thing totally planned out from the get-go. Or if you don't know and you're just kind of playing to find out, a place to make notes that you can easily kind of just come back afterwards and find out, you know, like, or you know, like, as you say, whatever thing you say, or as you're stealing an idea from one of your players at the table, right? You can just like quickly like jot it down as you go. So what was the development process for this like? Was it just kind of like, this is what I want to use in my home game? Did y'all pop it out to other people for them to take a look at? What did it look like to try to put it together and figure out what was the right mix of that? Hey, here's the sparks, and here's the space.
Yeah, so it started out something pretty simple. Like I said, I designed a notebook for Familiar Faces, and I used that as a template, very much so for myself. And I was like, hey, this is really makes sense. You know, it's just line notebook, but it has just a couple words on the side, and it really helps. And I try to think about anything that I would want to potentially put in an adventure. You know, what requires the world to be, one, like explorable, and two, pretty sandboxy, like how things are interconnected. And so I came up with version 1, and that's when I first started. I asked a couple groups, probably the third-party Mothership Discord first, because I'm pretty close to some of the people there. And then I asked like the Facebook group, you know, I just asked different people as the versions came out. So I think this is version 6, just different tweaks and stuff. And if you go to the last page on the notebook PDF, it was way more intense than I thought it would be. You know, I thought it'd be kind of simple, like, hey, here's a line thing, here's some prompts, and that's like all you need for a notebook. But I really tried to be, well, I listened to a lot of videos on people's takes on different notebooks. I also looked at, like I said, field notes and then the world building notebook. And I kind of looked at like kind of some of the things they were doing to address issues that people had or just make it more usable. Because God, I know so many people, including myself. I have so many notebooks that I don't really write in. And so I was really focused on what is easy to make it write down. And one thing I say on the Kickstarter page is like, the reason why it's like cheap and small is because if you have a $20 notebook, it's really hard to write something down because it might be bad. It might not be good enough. You're wasting space. And so I was like, well, it makes more sense just to have a bunch of stuff that maybe you transfer into your Word doc or you transfer more cleanly into a fresh notebook. And this last page kind of shows some of the developments to really help or some of the thought process behind what we did with the different grids to make sure that they were as usable as possible and as versatile as possible. So even this like maps, visual schematics, you can easily write across those crosses instead of actually drawing boxes around them or whatever. But it's also helpful because there's not as many dots in between. There's just like there's more negative space, which you can envision more, use more, scan better. And so all those types of things were kind of considered throughout the process. And like I said, it became much more of a project than I actually intended it to be, but awesome. All for the better.
Yeah, no, like dot paper is my favorite type of notebook paper. So like I was glad to see a lot of dot space in there because it just lets you figure out how you want to section off a page more than anything else, right? I can dungeon it out. I can make writing space and keep fairly in line. It is my favorite way to go. And I know there's people out there who love line stuff, but I'm a blank page or grid person all day long. And so, but I do love that like the goal was like quick, accessible. People can also just get the PDF to print out the pages they need as they need them. A lot of easy ways to kind of integrate it into what they're already doing. And so I also want to talk a little bit about like some of the specific prompts that you chose, because there is some like just really useful stuff as you go through here. And again, like the concept is like any of these could have been, D66 or 100 entries, D20 tables, all kinds of stuff. Like I love living in the D10 world because for whatever reason, and some people will be like, oh, it's just because of Mothership. I'm like, I mean, kind of, but I had somebody the other day who's never played Mothership who was like, anything besides D10 because that's the sci-fi number and I don't want to do sci-fi. And I'm like, that's so weird that people just associate 10 with being the sci-fi number. Either way, these tables that y'all have that you set up, it's things as specific as like names, other stuff like that, but the worthwhile aspects, just rolling a couple of sparks to say, here are the couple of the types of things you might be going down to this planet for, the type of civilization. But if you go down, you get into more granular stuff like cities. So if you're rolling around for stuff like that, notable locations within them, and then you get back to like the threats spark section, right? So like things that you're actually going against, like the ability to just sit down with the notebook, even like I said, at the table and just roll through what you're doing and then make the notes as you go. Lets you kind of sit down and no prep, just encounter a new planet in a sci-fi setting and then document it as you go. And so if your players have said, hey, we really love this and we want to hang out here, great. If they're like, this place is terrifying us and killing us and we need to get out of here, they can do that. But just the ability to kind of do it. But like some of the things on like the threat sparks table, like one of them is like 3 childhood friends, right? Like that also, but you're also dealing with a plotted assassination or human altered weather. Like, and so how the different pieces come together as far as when you go through here creates a lot of replayability and a lot of like very unique combinations kind of as you go. And so it is a lot of fun to see just kind of some of the different pieces that you've come up with. Even down to like super granular, the tactical layout of an encounter, right? Like, hey, what happened when these people followed you in or you ambushed them? What was the scenario? What was the setup? What happens when you roll kind of for a random encounter and you need to all of a sudden figure out everybody's positioning? taking that kind of cognitive load off the GM. It's a big thing that we try to do, like in our house games, is just say, like, we want the GM to come as a player who's really just kind of taking what everybody else puts in, like, driving the game, driving the action, using good technique. But like, if they didn't prep something out in advance, that's fine. Tables like this that you can just roll on and note, like, here's what's happening, is 100% the type of tools that I love to be able to hand GMs and that I love to use at the table. But then when somebody asks you 3 or 4 sessions later, hey, what happened? Why did we, what was here again? Your ability to remember sometimes is a little bit harder. And so having an actual notebook to put them in, also too, is just a really enjoyable thing to be able to start pulling it all together. How many planets have you built so far?
I think just one.
Just one?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I've so I've done a lot of tables and I've like tested a lot of tables, but I haven't. I've kind of been tackling them not
from beginning to
like
end,
in sequence. So like each spread is something like the city spread has everything that you need to know about the city, like the services or the jobs list. So I've been tackling them kind of like a spread at a time and an area at a time or a concept at a time. So like the terrain, obviously you're rolling planets. So like I've made planets that way, but I guess if I took it as how many like entire
that's
that
100% what I was asking.
So,
you hit the right question.
Yeah.
You got to get at least a solar system done before the end of the campaign. You've got 7 days. I need a whole solar system by that time.
Honestly, I'm pretty stoked though, because I've been tweeting like the different roles, and that's just been, I don't know, it's just awesome to kind of use and really just like what those sparks become in the moment for me, because I try and do it pretty quickly, just because I'm in the middle of a campaign, but also because I want the tool to be good enough to do that, and that's how I've like developed these tables, and I've put a lot of time into these tables.
Yeah.
So I've been like kind of testing it out as I'm doing this, and I don't know. It's been, I'm much more. There's a lot more sparks in me right now for things to build out, and sometimes it's hard to not just kind of bring this into that and this into this, or there's a lot of shiny objects right now while rolling these tables, because there's a lot of systems that I've been really enamored with lately. That some of these roles, I'm like, oh, this could be like a Cosmosaur adventure, or this could be, Fallen. Within Fallen, I've written a little bit towards something like that, and it's cool. Been really nice to use.
I love it. I also love, the quote from Chris, who's a publisher and a GM on the page. It's a great quote generally, but also the use of Karth as a reference for the size of a campaign for folks who aren't familiar with what that is. It's the Desert Moon of Karth, I'm assuming, which is a phenomenal module written by Joel Hines over at Silver Arm Press, who we've had on recently, and that we played when it was at Kickstarter. It's super expansive. And but a lot of it starts with a very small book. There's just so much in it that you can keep on digging on. And I absolutely love that as a measurement size for sci-fi stuff. Because one of the things about Karth is it is a really good example of like a planet you land on that is very singular and very unique in the Mothership world, far more Western themes. It's hard to get onto and off of. There's a lot of things going on there, but it is very much the epitome of planet design and kind of open world campaign. You can go in a lot of different directions when you land there, and there's a ton of stuff to play around with. So Karth sized is a very good good adjective, but also very high praise. You mentioned affordability a lot, as far as how this works. Talk to us a little bit about kind of some of the pledges and some of the things that y'all are doing to just create accessibility financially for folks.
Yeah, for sure. So discounts start at like the 2 notebook tier. There's everything's kind of, the Planet Builder is discounted for the campaign already. But yeah, I was kind of looking at it, and so after Knights of Lazarus and Familiar Faces, I've kind of planned out where I would like to go with Spicy Tuna. A lot of that has to do with hiring people I really admire or I've kind of worked with or kind of known. And so we have like our next 6 projects kind of laid out, and a lot of that's not written by myself, and a lot of that's not going to be laid out by myself or illustrated by myself. A lot of it's just like, hey, like, excitingly working with people. And the notebooks is something that I saw for myself, like I said, and then it evolved from there. But I kind of looked at it as something that I didn't want to. I don't know. I feel I kind of mentioned imposter syndrome before. I feel really weird pushing boundaries and prices sometimes, for multiple reasons. It's not just because I don't think it's good enough or I undervalue myself. A lot of it's for affordability and use cases. A lot of people use community copies around here. And for the notebooks themselves, I was like, well, part of what I knew about it is it's black and white printed and they're 40 pages. So it's not huge, it's not overly expensive, and it's not a project that was really driven as like something that was going to be needed to kind of bring in income per se. I wanted it to be worth my time in some ways, but a lot of that was like the product itself. So a lot of the focus on the pricing was like, I know that it's a notebook, it's not a module, it's not a $16 40-page thing, because it's not giving you all that. So I wanted to just really focus down on like, hey, what's like actually reasonable for our time input. And so it's, I think the discount's down to like $6 a piece pretty quickly, at like 8 books, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, what, like I've seen people. So there's another notebook by Peter Regan, I think, who does the Black Hack, and he does these like bulk. You can order like 144. They're like super cheap, but they're A6 and a lot shorter. And I was like, what, this is just a great. I see that people like benefit from having tools, and so this is just a nice little thing that, it's priced to be profitable because it takes time, but ultimately I want it to be something that's like really helpful. And I've seen it help the people who play tested it, and I've seen it help me. So affordability is more important than driving, maximizing cost to size or whatever else it was. So
no, like I said, and I love it. I love that y'all have, 2 things I love to see on any designer's project is like, hey, here, here's why we're charging what we're charging, especially for the project like this, being able to get multiple copies. So when you're like, yeah, like I mainly play in space games, right? So I want the ability to consistently generate concepts for how we're doing these different things, where my players are landing, what they're doing, where they're going. Like I want all that stuff. Is actually really helpful for as a tool, but it is one that like people are like, oh man, if they're $16 each, like I'll get one, right?
right.
But when they're more, when they're very accessible at that like $6, $8 range, where you're not worried to write in them, where you're ready to just like plop down some thoughts. I think that's huge. It also just makes it easy for like if a bunch of friends who all play space games and take turns GMing, like each want to go in on a set, like they can for their table, split them up. So that's, speaking of people who write stuff for space games, Real Meat Castle just showed up in the chat, and so we've got Christian with us. Christian, have you backed the Planet Builder? I'm going to put you on the spot on blast right now. Have you backed yet? And if not, why not? No, you don't have to tell us why not. You just need to go do it. He has. Awesome. Christian, tell me in the chat what you're most excited about and looking forward to. Also, if you have any questions for Marco, let us know also too. Yeah, no, like I said, I've been excited from the get-go. And I know I asked you earlier, I know you said you've been having other people do the art. Did you do the art for these, or was that did somebody else do these?
Yeah, I did. And it's actually, there's a lot of talk about public domain art right now. It's all public domain. It's all Affinity photo magic. It's rather than Photoshop magic. A lot of it is. I kind of draw on top in some ways, but this style I have really loved to do. I kind of stumbled upon it, and when I was making the plans for Familiar Faces, and I was like, man, I just love this. So I started doing it, and it only needed to be simple. I really wanted the art to be vague
Yeah.
because I did not want it to make you think of things. Um, I wanted to be like, okay, there's a shape and some things, or like the planets are very nondescript, and so that's very purposeful. But yeah, I used Unsplash and then Affinity Photo.
No, they turned out really well. I've loved the vibe of it from the get go of like just like the vague sense of like motion the lines suggest of like a planet moving through space, as well as just kind of the different bundled elements. It's all very very good. And then on the planet builder like zine, the almost feeling of like suspended like Christmas tree ornaments that comes along with those like vertical lines of like you are the master of this universe, or all like there's all these little bits of suggestivity without them implying anything specific to the design process. But then like I mentioned the threat pages earlier, right? Like in this like just this almost exploding kind of face thing, the divided kind of portal feel, like these somewhat ominous images, right? Like they're just all
Mhm.
very very cool, very minimalist art that again, yeah, like just like you were saying, don't say here's the thing you need to make, but suggest a
Yeah.
little bit about tone, vibe, while keeping things very, very broad. Christian said that he got an early look at it and it's really cool. It just looks super inspiring. It's a great way for me to funnel that creativity when world building into the right spots, which is awesome. So you talked a little bit about Cosmosaur, some other systems coming up. I know we've talked about getting some of these in the hands of some other Through the Void creators as we get prepped for that. Like, have you thought about like, or are you encouraging people to like create their own Spark lists or do other things like that as they're going through? If people wanted to customize this down and say like, here's the world I really want to create, and I want to get a little bit more specific. Are there ways that you're really encouraging that throughout the course of the zine or the project?
Yeah, I would say I'm not. I
That's fine.
yeah, I've one of the key tenets of the notebook has been versatility. Um, so Cosmosaur is like my number one game this year. I absolutely love it. It was my son's first tabletop experience. He's
I'll love
6,
it.
and I adore everything about it, between the writing and the layout and the art. But I'm pretty much the first module I made, Constant Downpour, is system agnostic, but it's really along, like if you were to describe it by system, you'd say Mothership, and that's pretty much what I write. Is kind of like within that harsher landscape. Um, but as much as it like started out as a tool for me, I wanted to be a tool that's very useful. I kind of, like I said to you, how I want to get it, and to just make it accessible, kind of free for some people who maybe are writing for Through the Void. Likewise, I'm in the Mothership community, so I will provide that as well. And then also, just want to proliferate it. So not everybody's a notebook user. A
Right.
lot of people are not. But if you are and you want to use it, then I want to make it the easiest possible. So
Yeah. The other thing that I mentioned, because I mentioned there were two things on your campaign that I really love. The other one is just the ability to get caught up on a creator's work, right? Like just saying like you can get familiar faces, you can get Knights of Lazarus, you can get these things if you're just discovering what we do and you like it or you want to support us. Like here are other ways to do that. In all honesty, like it's one of my favorite things that I see creators do from time to time is that like catch up, add on, or pledge level functions. So if people are watching this and have not had a chance to check out any of the work that you're doing, if any of it sounded cool, you want to check it out, please do. I highly suggest both of the zines, but Knights of Lazarus especially has some really, really amazing stuff in it and some just tremendous space fantasy vibes. It's still very like, I feel like a lot of times when people say space fantasy, they mean like we put magic in space, right?
yeah,
But it is far more of like this has the feeling of like knights battling like tough adversaries, a lot of like melee elements in it, but still solidly even if you're in a hard sci-fi setting, being able to lean straight into why and how that's happening, or lean the other way. So it's a very flexible piece, and I just want to encourage people, if they haven't had a chance to look at it, to look at that also too, as an add-on to their pledge. Awesome. So you already kind of tilted it a little bit out there. Tell us a little bit about kind of the future. So we've got this. Y'all are ordering test prints and proofs already because the project is done, right? Like this was a very simple, very direct project. Which as somebody who's ordering proofs right now, also for a project that took a year to finish. Man, good for you. And shipping's going to start as early as end of October for the project. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that y'all are going to be looking to building over the course of the next year.
Yeah. So kind of like I said, I mean, I've been in the mothership circles mostly, and God damn, there is so much talent in this tabletop space. And, I just feel I've always wanted to work with people more talented than me. And no matter what I do, I always want to work with very talented people. And so I'm luckily from the Kickstarter of Vaccine Lazarus and Familiar Faces, kind of put some money aside of that and reached out to a couple people that I've worked with. Meat Castle is one of them that I'm working with, and he worked with me on orbital debris, and that was also a big project that I was part of, like one of 14 creators, and really got a taste for working together and working with people. And so I'm working with a couple of those creators now, and then always want to be working with more people eventually. But so what's next is we have the next Kickstarter is Constant Downpour, but for Mothership. And so Constant Downpour, it was something that, like I said, I discovered Zane Quest, and I was like, this is what I want to put my 5 to 10 hours a week into until it's done. But it was really like kind of already happening when I finally kind of allowed myself to put time into it. And so, I think we had 99 backers. But I'm extremely proud of what it is and what it became, because it was late and they had to push back because we were really developing it and really kind of trying to make a good first showing for ourselves. And so Constant Downpour will be launched in November, and it will be retweaked because people have gotten it in the last Kickstarter as well. And so it was more of a linear adventure, and it'll become more of a kind of sandbox, open world adventure. And so there'll be some utility to people who already have the initial adventure, even though I think, we get better. So it iterates into a better thing. So after that, in 2023, we're going to do a Primal Quest release, which I'm very excited for. And then I have 2 Mothership projects in the work. One of them is with Meat Castle, and then the other one is that one's called Outsourced, and that's actually all my modules are all interconnected. So Familiar Faces has a lot of connections with Knights of Lazarus, and then Constant Downpour will have a lot of connections with Outsourced, which is kind of this real bad corporation that sends people out to disappear. And so, like, if you're a military member who, they want gone, but if they assassinate you, then there's a lot of red flags and investigations going on. They will just say, oh, hey, we don't have anything for this guy to do. Let's make some money by outsourcing him on a mission. And their job is to make anybody disappear legitimately on mission. And so that's what Outsourced is. But it is also the corporation that sends people to Venus, which is where Constant Downpour takes place.
I also love the hidden mothership class inside of the Planet Builder notebook. Whoever solves that puzzle is going to be really excited to connect it all into the rest of the worlds. No, but I love that. I love when people create cinematic universes out of their own work. It is one of my secret favorite things to be like, okay, this is all somewhat interconnected, right? And even when people are playing them, they might play one and be like, this was cool, and then they play another one and they're like, oh, that feels like it connects here, and then they just start asking the question, wait, are all these things connected or not? And so but Orbital Breeze was a very cool product and project And so the killer team, like very cool. I'm very excited to eventually hold it in my hands also too. So
Crazy how much talent's on there. It's
abs-
crazy. It should be out in November.
yeah, no, I know
Very soon.
it's coming
Mhm.
soon. Like I'm very very excited about it. It's where I found there like some also like in addition to people who were really like well known in Mothership, it brought together a lot of people who were really like just coming out, doing their own first couple of things, and then like dropping into this project also. Who I really, really, really love, and we've seen come on really strongly with their own projects after that. So I like I said, I can't wait to get it. I am sure we will have it in on stream at some point in time, just because it's such a great list of folks and some people who are in our own community, and I can't wait to see how everything comes together for it. So, but in the meantime, while people are waiting on that, right?
Yeah.
What they need to do is head over to Kickstarter, get the link in the description of the video, and check out the Planet Builder Notebook. If you're somebody, and you might be thinking like, there's a lot of design conversation. Like, do I need to be a designer for this? No. Like I said, if you're somebody who's sitting at your home table and you're like, I didn't prep a session tonight. We're going to play Mothership. We're going to play Through the Void. We're going to play some sort of space game. Being able to plop it down and make some rolls and kind of build the world as you go. And explore it together with your table. You can have an absolute blast with little to no prep, and keep track of all the details. But if you are somebody out there who's building within the Mothership, Through the Void, or other space game vibes, it's a great tool to pick up to be able to start designing projects and worlds and planets to go in that space. So I'm really excited. Again, head over to Kickstarter. The link is in the description. To check out this project and to get caught up on any of the other projects besides Constant Downpour, which you'll have to wait for the next Kickstarter for.
Yeah. I don't
To get checked out. Marco, if people want to find out more about Spicy Tuna RPG, the work that y'all do, where's the best place for them to go?
Best place is probably, well, actually, you know what? The Guac is our newsletter. It's a Substack. That's probably the best to be like more intimate about what's happening. But if you want kind of constant things or just seeing everything here and there, Twitter at Spicy Tuna RPG or Spicy RPG or Spicy Tuna RPG is the best place to go. So
awesome. And the link to the Guac has been right below your face the entire time. So if people want to go check that out, it's a great place for it. Last question. Why are Serranos the best pepper?
Oh, because they are a little bit more spicy than jalapenos, and they're more flavorful.
Both of those things are true. Serranos are our house pepper. Like we don't ever have jalapenos in house. We always have Serrano peppers in house. Nice. I use them all the time. But it is the general best pepper for cooking, for flavor, for heat. Now I say that as somebody who is like totally not bothered by spicy things at all.
That's fair. Yeah.
But so
they're not too bad though. They're
if you're somebody
accessible.
who can't handle a jalapeno, then you can't handle a Serrano also too. Awesome. Well, this has been Prestige Class with Marco Serrano. Oh wait, before I do that, I was about to dismiss everybody. Oh, I can't. Hold on real quick. Couple things. Friday with Scott Ools, we've got the Few and Cursed role-playing game coming up. It is a alternate history Western game where 90% of the water on the surface has disappeared and these crow people are trying to kill us and take all of our stuff. I'm very excited to play it this Friday. I'm also going to get to play it over on October 2nd over on Quackalope's channel also too with them. He just messaged me about that today. Very excited to sit down and finally play an RPG with Jesse. After that, on Saturday, we've got You Meet in a Tavern, You Die in a Dungeon from Matt over at Ursa Dice. It's a procedurally generated dungeon crawler where you meet in a tavern and then you do die in a dungeon. And so we are going to play that. We also have part 4 of our Apocalypse Keys series on Saturday night. It should be the conclusion. We talked about, we expanded it 1 week so that we'd had more time, but I'm very excited. Either the door to the apocalypse will open and our doom will come, or we will solve it and stop it, or maybe we'll cause the apocalypse ourselves. Who knows? Tune in to find out more about that. But this has been Prestige Class with Marco Serrano, and until next time, class is dismissed. Marco, thanks so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.